I never believed in mountain superstitions until I spent 3 days lost in the Austrian Alps with something that wouldn't let me leave. My name's irrelevant now, but what matters is that I was an experienced climber. 20 years scaling peaks across 3 continents. The Grossglockner should have been routine a solo winter ascent. I'd planned for months. I had the gear, the training, the weather window. What I didn't have was any preparation for what lives in those heights. The first day went perfectly. I made camp at 3,200 meters as planned. My tent a small orange dot against infinite white. The sunset was spectacular, painting the snowfields in shades of blood and copper. I remember thinking how lucky I was to have this moment alone, away from the chaos of the world below. That night I heard the singing. At first, I thought it was wind through the rocks. But wind doesn't maintain perfect pitch. Wind doesn't form words and languages you almost recognize. The melody was beautiful and deeply wrong, like hearing your mother's lullaby coming from a stranger's corpse. I unzipped my tent. The moon was full, bright enough to read by. The singing came from upslope, maybe 200 meters higher. Against every instinct, I grabbed my headlamp and started climbing toward it. The voice grew clearer as I ascended. It was a woman's voice, high and clear, singing something that sounded like Old German mixed with sounds human throats shouldn't make. I crested a ridge and saw her. She stood on a narrow ledge, wearing a white dress that moved in wind I couldn't feel. Her hair was long and dark, her feet bare against the snow. She was looking right at me, still singing, her mouth moving in ways that didn't match the sounds emerging. Then she stepped backward off the ledge. I rushed forward and looked down. Nothing, just a 500-meter drop into darkness. No body, no sound of impact. Just my ragged breathing and the sudden complete silence. I returned to my tent, telling myself it was altitude sickness, that I'd hallucinated the whole thing. But when I crawled back into my sleeping bag, I found footprints in the snow around my tent. Small, bare footprints. They circled my shelter exactly 7 times before leading away downslope. I should have descended right then. Instead, I convinced myself there was a rational explanation. Maybe another climber. Maybe I'd sleepwalked. The excuses sound pathetic now. Day 2, I continued upward. The singing started again around noon, always from just ahead, always just out of sight. I'd round a corner and catch a glimpse of white fabric disappearing behind rocks. I'd see footprints that filled with snow as I watched. By evening, I knew I was being herded. Every time I tried to deviate from the route toward the summit, the singing would grow harsh, discordant, painful. When I followed the path she wanted, it became beautiful again. I was a dog on an invisible leash. That night, she came to my tent. I woke to pressure on my chest, like someone sitting on me. The tent fabric showed the clear impression of a human form pressed against it from outside. The singing filled my skull, so loud I thought my eardrums would burst. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. I could only watch as the impression moved down my body, as if she were examining me through the nylon. Then she spoke, and her words were inside my head. You must finish the climb. You must reach the top. You owe this to those who fell. The pressure released. I lay gasping, my heart trying to hammer through my ribs. When I finally gathered courage to check outside, there were dozens of footprints. They covered every inch of snow around my tent, overlapping, chaotic, as if she'd been dancing. On day 3, I abandoned the climb. I didn't care about the summit, about my pride, about the money I'd spent. I just wanted off that mountain. I packed at first light and started descending. But the mountain had changed. Landmarks I'd noted on the way up were gone. The ridge I'd crossed didn't exist. My GPS showed me in the correct location, but the terrain was wrong. I'd descend for an hour and end up higher than I started. I'd follow my own tracks in the snow and they'd lead me in circles. The singing never stopped. It came from every direction now, echoing off rocks, seeming to emanate from the snow itself. I ran, I slid down snowfields, fell down scree slopes, destroyed my gear and my body trying to escape. And every time I looked back, she was there, standing on ridges behind me, perched on impossible ledges, always in that white dress, always watching with eyes that caught the light like an animal's. It took me 3 days to descend what should have taken 6 hours. When I finally stumbled into the valley, I was hypothermic, frostbitten, and 50 pounds lighter. The rescue team said I was lucky to be alive. I never told them the truth. How could I explain that I'd been allowed to leave? That on my final night on the mountain, she'd appeared one last time, standing at the edge of my firelight, and spoken again, "You may go, but you will remember, and you will tell others to stay away." That was 4 years ago. I haven't climbed since, but I still hear the singing sometimes, late at night when the wind blows from the south. And I know that someday, when I'm old or sick or simply tired, I'll hear it clearly again. And I'll follow it back up into the snow to finish whatever climb she's chosen for me. The emergency shelter on the Eiger's north face saved my life, and I wish to God it hadn't. Professional mountaineers don't talk about the old hut at 3,800 meters. It's marked on maps from the 1950s, but modern guides pretend it doesn't exist. I learned why during the worst storm I've ever experienced, when it was either shelter there or die on the mountainside. My climbing partner had fallen 6 hours earlier. I won't describe it except to say that one moment we were roped together, and the next I was alone, with a severed line and the sound of something hitting rocks very far below. The storm hit 20 minutes later, visibility dropping to 0, wind speeds that made standing impossible. I found the hut by pure chance, my hand brushing against wood when I expected only rock. The door was unlocked. I fell inside and slammed it behind me, collapsing in the sudden absence of wind. The interior was larger than it should have been. A single room, maybe 6 meters square, with a fireplace, a table, 2 chairs, and a narrow bed against the far wall. Everything was covered in dust except for the fireplace, which had fresh wood stacked beside it and kindling already laid. I should have questioned that. Fresh wood at 3,800 meters, in a hut that supposedly hadn't been used in decades. But I was hypothermic and desperate. I lit the fire. As warmth returned to my fingers and toes, I explored my shelter. The walls were covered in writing. Names, dates, messages carved into the wood. I recognized some of them famous climbers, people who died on this mountain. But their names were accompanied by dates that made no sense. Ernst Huber, 1957, I should have turned back. Pierre Blanc, 1962, the voices told me to jump. Klaus Zimmermann, 1973. It showed me my death before it happened. There were dozens more, climbing closer to present day. The most recent I could find was from 2019. Don't fall asleep. Don't let it show you. I was still reading when I heard the footsteps upstairs. The hut had no second floor. I'd seen that clearly from outside, briefly, through the snow. But the ceiling above me creaked with the unmistakable sound of someone walking. Back and forth, like someone pacing. I stood frozen, listening. The footsteps continued for exactly 5 minutes, then stopped. In the silence that followed, I heard breathing. It came from directly above where I stood, as if someone were lying on a floor that didn't exist, their face pressed to boards, listening to me, listening to them. Then the scratching started. Something was carving words into the wood above me. I could hear the knife or fingernails, or whatever tool it used, gouging through old timber. The sound went on for minutes, forming letters I couldn't see, spelling messages I'd never read. When it stopped, so did the breathing. I didn't sleep. I fed the fire and watched the door, and tried not to look at the ceiling. But as the night wore on, the hut began to change. The carvings on the walls moved. Not much, just enough to catch in peripheral vision. Names rearranged themselves. New dates appeared. I watched one message transform. From God help me to God left this place, while I stared directly at it. Around midnight, the bed made a sound. The sound of someone sitting up. I turned to look and saw the impression of a body in the dust on the mattress, like someone had been lying there and risen. The impression moved, shifting to the edge of the bed, and I could see the depression of feet touching the floor. Whatever made that impression stood up. I watched invisible footprints appear in the dust, crossing the room toward me. They stopped 3 feet away. I could feel it watching me, could smell something like copper and old ice. When it spoke, the voice came from where a mouth should be. At the height where a face should be, you came here to hide from the storm. But the storm is not what kills climbers on this mountain. I ran for the door. It wouldn't open. I pulled and yanked and threw my weight against it, but it held as if sealed. Behind me, more footprints appeared in the dust. Multiple sets now, coming from every corner of the room. We all came here to escape, the voices said. They weren't synchronized, each slightly out of phase with the others, creating a horrible chorus. We all thought we were safe. Now we wait. We wait for others like us. We wait for our turns. The footprints surrounded me. I felt pressure on my shoulders, many hands pushing me down. I fought, but they were so strong, so cold. They forced me to my knees, then to the floor, pressing my face against the dusty boards. Look, they commanded. Against my will, my eyes focused on the grain of the wood beneath me. And in that grain I saw myself climbing tomorrow after the storm cleared. I saw the rope breaking. I saw the fall, the impacts, the way my body would wedge into a crevasse where it would never be found. I saw it with perfect clarity, like watching a film of my own death. This is what we do, the voices explained. We show you what comes next. We showed all of them. Some jumped to take control of it. Some tried to change it. None escaped it. The pressure released. I scrambled away, backing against the door. The footprints retreated to various corners of the room, and I was alone again with the fire and the carved names and the knowledge of my death. I spent that night carving my own message into the wall with my climbing knife. I didn't write my name, I couldn't bear to add it to that list. I only carved, "The hut shows the future. Don't look. Don't listen." When dawn came, the door opened easily. I stumbled out into clear weather, the storm passed, the mountain peaceful and beautiful in morning light. I should have descended immediately. But I thought about what I'd seen, about the fall I could now avoid, the future I could change. I climbed anyway. I had to know if it was real, if I could beat what the hut had shown me. The rope broke at exactly the point I'd seen, but I caught myself, drove in an ice screw, survived. I laughed with the kind of manic relief that's close to weeping. I'd changed it. The future wasn't fixed. That was 3 months ago. But here's the thing, here's why I'm writing this now. Why I need someone to know. I keep seeing more. Every night when I close my eyes, I see the next death. Tomorrow's, next week's, next year's. The hut didn't just show me one future. It opened my eyes to all of them, every possible ending, playing out in infinite variation. And in every single one, I end up back at that hut. Different routes, different reasons, different years, but always, eventually I return. Just like everyone else whose name is carved on those walls. We all left. We all survived. But we're all going back. The thing about the Matterhorn is that people die there all the time. So when you find a body, you report it and keep climbing. What you don't do, what you should never do, is bring it down yourself. We were a team of 4, attempting the Hernley Ridge in late September. The season was nearly over, the mountain emptying of tourists and fair-weather climbers. We liked it that way. Less traffic, more solitude, the mountain returning to something like its natural state. We found the body at dawn on our second day, wedged into rocks at about 4,100 meters. Male, maybe 30 years old, wearing modern gear. He couldn't have been there long, a few days at most. No obvious cause of death, no trauma we could see. He looked like he'd simply sat down and decided to stop. The strange part was his expression. Not peaceful, not agonized, ecstatic. His mouth was open and something between, a laugh and a scream, his eyes wide with what looked like wonder. Our team leader made the call to the rescue service. They said they'd send a helicopter when weather permitted, probably the next day. Standard procedure. We should mark the location and continue our climb. But one of us, I'll call him Uopo, objected. He was our youngest member, 26, strong as an ox and stubborn as one too. He said it was disrespectful to leave the body lying in the open, that we had the strength and skill to bring it down ourselves, to give this person dignity. We argued bringing down a body would take time, energy, risk, but Jakob wouldn't relent, and eventually we agreed to help. We'd take it to the next hut, hand it over to the rescue team there. It seemed reasonable. We should have looked at the body's face more carefully. We should have asked why someone would die with that expression. We should have noticed that despite the cold, despite days of exposure, the body wasn't frozen. Jakob volunteered to carry it first. We fashioned a harness, secured the body to his pack. The corpse's arms hung over Jakob's shoulders, its head lolling against his neck. It looked obscene, like a terrible parody of rescue. We'd gone maybe 30 minutes when Jakob started talking to it. Just small comments at first, telling it to hold on, that we'd get it down safe, apologizing for the rough ride. We thought it was Jakob's way of processing the situation, maybe a coping mechanism. Dark humor is common in mountaineering. But then the body answered. I didn't hear it at first. Jakob would speak, then pause, then respond as if in conversation. When I asked what he was doing, he looked at me confused. Just talking to our friend here. He's grateful we're helping. Says his name's Vincent. The body's face hadn't moved. Its jaw remained slack, eyes open and glazed. But Jakob insisted it was speaking, said he could hear it clearly. We stopped for a break. Jakob refused to put the body down. Sighed Vincent didn't want to be left in the snow again. We tried to physically separate them, but Jakob fought us with a strength that seemed impossible at that altitude. Finally, we retreated, agreed to take turns, told Jakob he could carry it for another hour. During that hour, Jakob changed. He stopped responding to us. He only spoke to Vincent now, carrying on long conversations with the corpse on his back. And his expression began to shift, his mouth slowly widening, his eyes getting larger, his face rearranging itself into that same ecstatic rictus the dead man wore. When the hour was up, he refused to give up the body. We tried to reason with him, then to force the issue. Jakob was impossibly strong now, tossing us aside like children. And the body, I swear to you, though I know how this sounds, the body was holding on. Its arms, which had hung limp before, were now wrapped tight around Jakob's chest. We called for helicopter rescue for both of them. But the weather turned bad again, visibility dropping. We were told to shelter in place, that extraction would come when possible. Jakob kept climbing, not down toward safety, but up toward the summit. And we followed because what else could we do? Leave him? He was our friend, our teammate. We thought we could still save him. By nightfall, we'd reached the Salve hut. Jakob refused to enter. He stood outside in the growing dark, swaying, the body still clinging to his back. Both of them wore that same terrible smile now. That's when I realized Jakob's face wasn't changing to match the corpse. The corpse was changing to match Jakob. The features were shifting, skin moving like clay. The dead man's face was becoming Jakob's face, or Jakob's was becoming his. They were merging, averaging out, becoming something in between. Our remaining teammate, call her Petra, made a grab for Jakob's harness, tried to cut the body free. The moment her knife touched the rope, Jakob's head snapped toward her with inhuman speed. He moved like a predator, like something that wore Jakob's body but was no longer Jakob inside. Vincent says you should carry him for a while, Jakob said. His voice was wrong, doubled like two people speaking in harmony. Vincent says you all should take a turn. He's been so lonely. He wants to share. The body's head lifted. Its eyes focused on Petra, and it smiled with Jakob's smile, and spoke with Jakob's voice. Please, I don't want to be alone anymore. None of us do. We ran. God forgive us. We left Jakob there, and we ran. We descended through darkness, falling and sliding and nearly dying a dozen times. We could hear Jakob behind us, following, calling out in that terrible dual voice, telling us to wait, to come back, that Vincent just wanted to meet us properly. The helicopter found us at first light, huddled and half frozen at a lower altitude. We told them about Jakob, about the body. They searched for 3 days and found nothing. No trace of our teammate, no corpse, no equipment. But here's the thing that keeps me awake. They did find something. At the exact spot where we discovered the original body, they found 2 sets of climbing gear, modern equipment barely used, and carved into the rock nearby, 2 names, Vincent and Jacob, with yesterday's date. The rescue coordinator showed me photos. The gear was arranged carefully, deliberately. 2 harnesses, 2 sets of crampons, 2 ice axes, laid out side by side like the mountain had claimed twins. I've researched every death on the Matterhorn I can find. Vincent was a real person. He disappeared on the mountain in 1987, 40 years ago. But in the photo they showed me, the body we found looked maybe a week old. I think Vincent had been waiting for someone strong enough, kind enough, foolish enough to try to help. And when they took him on their back, he held on. He merged, he became something new, something that was both Vincent and his carrier, together forever. And now Jacob is up there, wearing a face that's partly his and partly Vincent's, waiting in the rocks with that ecstatic expression. Waiting for the next person who thinks they're doing the right thing. The mountain is full of Badas. We all know that. What I wonder now is how many of them are still waiting for their turn. How many are still hungry to share themselves with someone new. I'll never climb again. But sometimes I dream I'm back on the Matterhorn, and I feel weight on my shoulders, arms wrapping around my chest. And I hear Jacob's voice, Vincent's voice, other voices I don't recognize, all speaking together. Thank you for helping. We've been so lonely. Now we can be together. Now you'll never be alone again. I wake up smiling, and the smile gets a little wider every time.